Good afternoon from the kitchen table. It's the 29th of May 2024 and it's coldish and wet and windy May, the say fills the haggard full of hay here in rural Ireland. Now I'm going back to the subject of this Eamon Ryan, and I'd just like to go a bit more on him because I got a very, very good response already from it, from talking about him. Now, I showed you the video already, and I'll link here under, where he talks about forestry, and he talks about the mistakes that's been made in forestry, and the situation is so profound or so important that I'll even visit it again. Now, what Eamon Ryan is behaving as somebody who had no say in power in Ireland. I have no say in power. The only way we can try and affect and stop the government's mad policies is to attack them on the Planning and Development Act and take cases in the High Court and win some and lose some. Many people putting everything they have at risk. Now, he was a minister for 8 years. He was in the Irish Parliament for at least 12. He was a minister in the way of doing what should be done, and he doesn't do it. Now, you're going to wonder, if you haven't looked at the video, what all he says. But he makes the point that 11% of Ireland is under timber, half of it under Culture, which is the state forestry board. Now, I fail to see what is so wonderful about 11% of our land being planted. It's all planted with Seeker spruce. It probably makes a bit of chipboard, and there are forestry posts made, but I just don't exactly see what's so great about that, or what's so great to brag about. Were we not just as well making mutton, sheep, and cattle beef? I mean, products are a very, very premium price at the moment. So what's so great about planting it? It doesn't do any harm. I have a few wee bits in my own farm. But don't forget, up until 3 years ago, when I let a bit of my land go rough, and maybe an odd tree growing naturally in the middle of it in areas that wasn't where I'd be mowing and all that sort of stuff and doing work, they cut the little bit of payment I was getting and made me take it out for my farm grant. Then eventually I made a video and they left it that they wouldn't cut it, and now they're giving you a slight grant for leaving a bit of that. That's only since Eamon Ryan left office that came in, or at least in the last year. And he had no more power after about last October, and he was in the end of the government's period. So he didn't do anything about that. Nobody could ever talk to him about that, and he done nothing about that situation to try and leave the wee bit of wild area there for the birds and the bees and for livestock and deer and everything. And in my area, we have a good lot of low-lying, roughish, boggish land, and there are deer and things in there. You wouldn't believe what all the things habit and live in there. So I don't know what he's roding on about, the great achievement of all the forestry. It's suppose it's useful. It is an industry, and there's a big crowd down in Dower doing very well, and that's I'm not giving out about that. I don't think we can grow our own electricity poles. I think they're all imported from Sweden. So where was the input there? Well, why didn't he do something about that and be able to tell us they're coming on now? He didn't do anything about it. Now, he wasn't the Minister for Forestry, but he was Minister for the Environment, and he was Energy. Now, he talks about Culture, the Irish State Forestry Board, of being a commercial lumber company. Well, they have to try and make something. But he says a lot of the land should not have been planted at all. That's what he says. Well, if it shouldn't have been planted, why didn't he act on it? Why didn't he raise it when he was in the Dáil back in 2010 or thereabouts, and then he became a minister? He was 8 years a minister, and he never spoke once that I heard about it at all. So this is rich for Eamon Ryan to come on and make these statements. Now, he's using all these big words, and he's always moving his arms around. Biodiversity. What does that mean? It's a nothing word. Biodiversity. Well, he's talking about the Seeker spruce forests having very little wildlife, and that is true. And there'd be more in a hardwood forest. But there's no biodiversity. Why, for example, have they no scheme where if you have a big ash tree growing on a hedge and it falls, you can market it? Why is there not some market for hardwood trees that fall? I had a big beech tree, 250 years old. It was that girth. and I had an awful job. It fell, and I had an awful job to cut it. There was no market for it. And there's the best of good beech timber. Why was there no effort made to get a market? I have ash trees, and there's no one. You can't ring up someone and say, will you come and take this and give me a few euros for it, and put it to good use. Perfectly straight lumber trees. No imagination whatsoever. Now, he then talks about using the woodlands for water management. Is he raving? Nobody takes him up on this. Totally, and it's nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with water management. We're told in today's paper that in 5 years' time there'll not be enough water in Dublin, and that is the case. So where's the water management there? He didn't do it. He was in power. He talks about using it for power supplies, and he talks about biodiversity. In his time, he encouraged the likes of Derrybrien Wind Farm that moved the whole turf and peat down off the mountain, destroying the the grouse species. An old Ice Age species, the red grouse, were destroyed, and he actively shoved windmills so that they bulldoze all of the grouse out of it, the few that remains. And he had the cheek to go down to County Laois, to the Sleep Bloom Mountains, and talk about biodiversity after him destroying hundreds, if not thousands, of a rare species, and has the cheek to talk about biodiversity. He talks about soil erosion. Why doesn't he talk about the Derrybrien Wind Farm? Why doesn't he talk about it? It has to be closed up now, a complete and utter waste. It never saved one bag of coal. He talks about creating spaces. There's plenty of space down in the west of Ireland and all around. We have a lot of space. There's walks everywhere. There's Killykeene, there's Dunneree in the north, there's forests over in Cooley. There are plenty of places like that. This is more using flowery language to look intelligent. Then he talks about the don't set new trees in the middle of the older trees. Again, he was the minister. Nothing done. He talks about the way he'd recommend planting trees in the middle of existing trees being very labour intensive. Well, the first thing is you have to get in there, and the days of getting two people with picks and shovels and digging holes to plant trees, that's over. It's done with machinery now. And he's talking about that the labour will bring in jobs. How is it going to be? Surely the product that's sold has to have a value that will pay the wages of the forestry staff. And the forestry always had a certain amount of workers. It always had a certain amount. So this idea of implanting this way is nonsense. There are ways that you could encourage hardwood forests and all of that, and it took a long time. And it wasn't in his period that anything was done about it. When they were actually taking a bit off the farm grant for having a bit of rough land, I was saying it doesn't make sense and made a video on it at least 4 years ago. And then he says high value lumber, that value would be lumber. All of the hardwood trees that I saw cut after the storm in January 2025 were cut up for firewood. The best of good sycamore, the best of good ash, the best of good poplar. Some wonderful timber because there's no market for it and no little encouragement to find a market when trees fall. That would be an intelligent thing to do for the environment. But you don't try to get the Green Party to go for that. And don't forget, they're mixed up with all this other stuff like mass migration and all of this and whinging on about climate change. So that's the point. Now, I want to explain again because some people ask me. The planning process in Ireland, because we are members of the EU, the Aarhus Convention was brought in, and that's for public participation on matters affecting the environment. It was guaranteed in the Single European Act, voted on from Ireland. It was guaranteed in the Lisbon Treaty. It's there. The public have the right, the citizen, to have an environment commiserate or in keeping with their well-being. That was the first thing. The second thing is that the Aarhus Convention recognised that there had to be an overarching plan or programme for plans or programmes of government. That was envisaged in it, and that was brought into law by the SCA directive and enacted fully into Irish law. There shall be an environmental assessment and a study carried out of all plans and programmes for energy, forestry, fisheries, river basin management, town and country planning, tourism, and all of that. They ignored it and never did it. They deliberately never did it. I conquered and went to various meetings, one in the Chester Beatty Library on the launch of the government green paper, and I told them, you must assess this. I stood up. In fact, I might even yet get a video of me standing up. You must comply with the law, the SCA directive. The result is there's no overarching plan or programme. So if they were to try to go for nuclear energy now, there's no overarching assessment of it. Moreover, if the North went to put in nuclear power, or Wales went to put in nuclear power, by right the Irish people should have a say on that. We're meant to have a say in what happens in our immediate vicinity. We have none, because the government doesn't do it themselves. So now whinging on today that we have to decide, the government has said that we have to decide between data centres and houses being powered. They have let all this demand from data centres run during Mr. Ryan's time, building thousands and thousands of megawatts of data centres that are gobbling up all our power and making a mockery of the idea that Ireland could control its emissions. What a lie that is to tell, for him to come out and behave as if he's some kind of a knight in shining armour. They've given us the highest electricity prices there are. Now, the thing about it, to go over it again, you have the overarching planner programme. So if it was nuclear energy, there should be one done on that, and then applications are made for the environmental impact statement under that, and then the planning and development application. The public have a right to have a say in the overall planner programme. So if there's a river basin management SCA, strategic one, the public living down along the Shannon, the public living along the Suir River, the Barrow, the Nore, the Fane, would all have a right to write in and say, I've looked at your report and you're mistaking there. You're saying that land there is not liable to flooding. I saw that flooded twice in my lifetime, and that should not be earmarked or zoned for housing, because the water can come up there maybe 3 metres or 9 feet sometimes, and that should be marked in, and any housing plan should take that into account, how they mitigate for that, or maybe build higher up or whatever. You have no way of doing that. You have no way. The result is, when a planning application goes in for some of those programmes, the first assessment that's done is at either the county council level or Board Planola, where there is no education, experience or anything in the topic. And I made the point that they could have a lady out on the street, and the reason why I mentioned parking tickets is that it's council employment. It's not to make little of people or anything else, but at least it's council employment. So if the county council had a person working for them putting on parking tickets, or if they had someone whose job it is to clean the toilets and go around to the public toilets and clean them, or somebody to look at dangerous buildings, they could technically appoint them to the planning section, and they could take in an application for a nuclear power station or a river project, or any of the things mentioned on that, windmills and everything else, and they can grant it based on the fact that their knowledge is not there. How can you make a decision on planning when you have absolutely no idea about what you're talking about? It was 2014 when the EU brought in the requirement to have some degree of expertise, and it's not properly written in. Moreover, on the SCA directive, the government has relied on a get-out clause to do with budgeting, which means that it's not, you have to wait until they're ready to plan it. We're trying to get cases against them. But why should the ordinary citizen have to fight the government to implement the Aarhus Convention and the SCA Directive, the Pollution Control Directive and the Habitats Directive? Why should we have to go to court to make sure they do it right? Surely it's up to them to do it right. And you have to admit that no matter how expert some group are that wanted to do, let's say, an SEA, a strategic assessment on nuclear energy, you'll need certain expertise, and that needs to be shared, and there needs to be public participation, and you need to have the right to go to the court if there's a serious mistake. Then you get an overarching document. This is just a little bit of paper, an overarching document which deals with all these points, and then the planning authority has that all covered, ticked down, where it should be, what it should be, what are the ways to dispose of the nuclear waste. If it's the north-south interconnector, where they should be placed. Are they needed at all? The Aarhus Convention must look at why are we doing it. They panicked over this climate thing, and they were lobbied by people who pay into their fund, their election fund, and the result is we have the finance houses of the world living out and sucking out of our electricity bills, all given away to strangers. That's the mess Eamon Ryan has made of Ireland's planning process. And now they were trying, when he left government, I don't know how they got on since, to stop the person having a say in objecting to the environment. Have I made that quite clear? A few people do contact me and say that I have a good way to explain a thing. But I think at the same time, you sort of get the idea how the law should be. We'll use this saucer, this plate. This is the overarching planner program. It might say that certain things shouldn't be built somewhere or there, but it's the overarching thing that say, right, we propose it's viable in these areas and these areas, and there should be mitigation. There'll have to be measures put in to make sure this works, or that the waste is disposed of some way, and that'll have to be monitored. And it's in the SEA directive about monitoring. And then they might say, this is what it will do. What happens if we don't do it at all? Is it just a whim of some politician, which is what Ryan pushed in? The destruction he did with his big wavy, biodiversity, this our happy talk. And this is the overarching planner program. Then when you have that document done and it's put through the courts and all, and we're happy enough, then the next thing you get is you get all the little EIAs, the little environmental impact statements underneath. So if it's for river basin management, you might have an EIA done to do a job down on the Suck River. They might want to take out some of the wood out of it or some of the blockage in it and decide whether that's a good idea. They might look to see what the effect of that would be on trout and all that. And so you get this balance done. But the main point is the planning authorities would not have to wonder what's the story. They wouldn't have to rule on things that even I don't know. I know that nuclear waste could be dangerous. I wouldn't drink it in my tea, and they probably know that, but that's no good. There is plenty of expertise out there on nuclear waste. And there's plenty of expertise on windmills and everything else. And I have made the point that it's easy to test Ireland's wind farms. Just take them out for a week during windy weather and connect them up again and see what they do. They won't do that. The whole thing is one massive fraud. And Eamon Ryan and his Green Party perpetuated that fraud by refusing to comply with the law that I recommended people vote for the European Union on a couple of occasions. I thought they would honour their doing it, and they'd have expert reports and environmental reports on everything, so that when it had come to planning, then you'd have a basic document. Because there's no basic document on wind turbines, on noise and all of that, people are suing in the court. There's a big case down in Wexford after being won by people. People have to go in and sue and shut them down because there was no overall assessment on noise. You see now the big offshore wind companies are fighting among themselves because they're talking about wind wake, that if you have a wind farm up there 5 miles, it'll take away the whole output of one lower down. We had that on our submissions to planning 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And nobody would listen. And now they're suing or now are complaining about it. And we had that there 10 years ago. That could have been dealt with in the SEA report. The judge recently in the case down in Wexford ruled about the wind energy guidelines that they don't deal with a certain type of noise properly, low frequency noise. That's only now. Look at the trouble suing for that instead of doing that in the original SEA. And this is what we're facing. The whole lot may be shut down, and there's a case in Europe that says that the wind energy guidelines are unlawful. They were never assessed either, and the government's trying to get out of it to say that they were in a short while before the SEA directive came into being. All of this is a dirty, rotten mess. And Eamon Ryan has some cheek on him. He has some neck. He should curl up and stay to hell quiet and shut up to come out and lecture us about one subject after making a complete mess of the other subject, which is energy, renewable energy and all of that. Have I explained that? Quite simple. Having ensured that the law on this was not complied with, he has the neck to come on and tell us, oh, well, if I was running forestry, I'd get it better. He has no SEA on silviculture, which is forestry, at all. There is none. There's no assessment at all. And a TD not in the Green Party told me that's because a lot of the voters have forestry and they don't want to be caught with it. The whole thing is illegal, is as illegal as it could be. The entire 4,000 megawatts of wind energy is illegal. And I remember being over in Mayo, and Pat Rabbitte, the former Minister for Energy, was there, and some idiot was shouting about putting a big lake up on the mountain away over in Mayo and bringing the water in 12 miles and pumping it out again for pump storage. It doesn't produce anything, it's just a way of storing it. Utter madness. I stood up and said, this is mad. I said, you'll do the SCA. Oh no, Pat Rabbitte, oh, it's a great idea. Oh, they were clapping. That's the reality of Mr. Eamon Ryan. And I want a debate on this. He knows RTE at the moment won't give him a debate, but nobody's watching them. They won't allow a debate. The rascality, the falsehoods, and the robbing and destroying of the Irish people and their environment by all of these politicians, but particularly those who claim to be environmental protectors, to wit the Green Party, is such a scam. They are such scam artists, such rascals. They think they're going to come out here and pontificate to us after what they've done. The people who break the law don't get to make the law. The people who break the law shouldn't get to make the law. Why should they? Somebody who has driven recklessly with a big lorry and killed a mother and her baby is prosecuted and gets jail. He doesn't come out and start trying to change the law. Oh, well, I shouldn't be charged. We'll have to change that law. And yet the culprits that break the law and in government refuse to allow the law to be implemented, which is a fair law, which all deals with the word assessment and all about assessment and expertise in the various areas. They have the cheek now to tell us what should be done. I hope that's a help to you folks. Good luck. We'll see you back. Comment underneath. Bye-bye. Thank you.